Should you buy the new Toyota 4Runner or the Toyota Land Cruiser? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. It has taken Toyota over 15 years to introduce an all-new 4Runner. So this new 6th generation model for 2025 is a pretty big deal. And after spending the last week test driving it, I'm going to tell you all the good, all the not so good, and whether it's worth it to consider buying one. And to make this a more interesting video, I've brought along the Toyota Land Cruiser for comparison, given that both are very similar type of SUVs. And to show you how close these two really are, even in price, I've got the 4Runner in the limited trim, which is one of the more expensive ones, with the base model Land Cruiser, the 1958. So the two SUVs that I'm testing are only around $2,000 apart in price. I have a lot of thoughts to share after driving these two SUVs, so let's start things off with some of the good, starting with the platform. 4Runner fans will be pleased to know that the new model is still a body-on-frame SUV, which means it's built for proper off-roading. It's built on the Toyota Global Truck platform, which is also shared with the Land Cruiser, which is sold as the Land Cruiser Prado in other markets, and the larger Land Cruiser 300 series, and a few Lexus models, the GX and the LX. So in terms of their chassis and platform, all of these SUVs are more or less the same. Another thing that they all share in common is that they are all manufactured in Japan, which is a really good thing for those who appreciate their vehicles being made in Japan, which I would definitely say is a major plus. The other nice thing is that Toyota has not sacrificed that traditional 4Runner feel. This still feels very much like a truck-based SUV. It has that typical truck feel on the road. You have a nice high seating position with a commanding view of the road, and it feels like a very tough, rugged, solid SUV with a very mechanical feel to it, which is a really good thing. And that's certainly true for both the 4Runner and Land Cruiser. And now for some of the not so good, probably the most controversial piece of these two SUVs, which is the drivetrain. Yes, after more than a 20-year run, Toyota has finally discontinued the famous 4-liter V6 engine and 5-speed automatic transmission that was used in the 5th generation 4Runner, which was an absolutely legendary drivetrain for its unbelievable reliability, probably the longest lasting, most trouble-free drivetrain that you could get in any brand new vehicle. One that could easily last for 300, 400,000 miles or 500,000 kilometers with ease. I have huge appreciation and respect for that drivetrain, but unfortunately its days have finally come. And now we have a brand new 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with an 8-speed automatic transmission, which comes standard on the 4Runner. And then you also have an optional hybrid version of the same engine, basically a hybrid system added to the same 2.4-liter turbo engine, which is standard on the Land Cruiser. Now, I know there are many that will immediately dismiss this drivetrain for the simple fact that it's not a 6-cylinder engine. But in its defense, there are some very good things that this drivetrain does very well. For one thing, there's the performance. The standard engine produces 278 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. And all of that torque comes in at a very low RPM. So this is a very punchy drivetrain. You can immediately feel that performance when you put your foot into it, and it definitely has much better performance and more power than the old 4-liter V6. And not only does it perform better, but it has better fuel economy too. It's rated for around 19 to 24 miles per gallon, or roughly 10 to 13 liters per 100 kilometers, which is not too bad. Another benefit of this drivetrain is the towing capacity. It's able to tow up to 6,000 pounds, which is quite impressive. Now, of course, when you push it, you can definitely tell that it's a 4-cylinder. It doesn't have a great sound, and it has a bit of a crude feel to it. But you know what? The 4-liter V6 wasn't exactly a very refined engine either. So in that area, I would say that this new engine is more or less the same. The major question, of course, is will this new drivetrain prove to be as reliable and long-lasting as the old one? Well, let's just say that I'm cautiously optimistic. Number one, this engine was first introduced back in 2021 in the Lexus NX. And since that time, it's spread across the Toyota and Lexus lineups. You can find it in the Lexus NX, the RX SUVs, also the Toyota Highlander, Grand Highlander, and Tacoma. And so far, it has proven to be a relatively trouble-free engine. And not only that, but it has a very simple turbocharger setup when compared to the one that's found in the Toyota Tundra. And even though Toyota did have to give in to emissions regulations, at least they resisted the urge to give this engine cylinder deactivation, and it does have both port and direct fuel injection to prevent carbon issues. But most importantly, because Toyota uses this engine on so many different Toyota and Lexus models, Toyota realistically cannot afford to have messed this engine up. It has to be as reliable and trouble-free as possible. And I think it's realistic for this engine to last at least 250,000 miles or more with good maintenance. So all things considered, I would not consider it to be a deal breaker. Now, the next question is, should you go for the standard engine or should you go for the hybrid version, given the choice on the 4Runner? Well, after driving them both back to back, I can honestly say that the extra power that you get with the hybrid is not really that noticeable. Even though it produces 326 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque, which is a huge jump from the base engine thanks to the power of that electric motor, you really don't notice that extra power unless you're pushing it really hard. And just driving it normally, as I've been doing, the extra power is not that noticeable. And because it's a performance hybrid, not a fuel economy hybrid, the fuel economy is basically the same as the standard engine. So you're spending a lot more money for a much more complicated drivetrain without getting much significant benefit. Now, this engine does come standard on the Land Cruiser, so on that model you don't have any choice. But given the choice on the 4Runner, I would go with the base engine. Now let's get on to some things that both the Land Cruiser and the 4Runner do incredibly well, which of course is their off-road ability. I recently attended a Toyota event in Texas where I had an opportunity to off-road both the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser on an off-road trail, which was a great experience. And no matter what kind of obstacle they faced, whether it was deep water or steep rocky cliffs, both the Land Cruiser and the 4Runner handled them with absolute ease. Now, there are some differences between them. The Land Cruiser comes standard with a full-time four-wheel drive system, whereas the 4Runner, on most trims, you get a part-time four-wheel drive. Either way though, you do have a 2-speed transfer case with a high and low range. And depending on the version, you can also get a locking center and rear differential and sway bar disconnect for better wheel articulation. Another difference between the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser is the suspension setup. The Land Cruiser basically comes one way with one suspension, and it is quite a comfortable driving SUV. Whereas with the 4Runner, you have 5 different types of suspension to choose from depending on the trim that you get. Standard suspension on the SR5 or adaptive suspension like on my limited test car. With the TRD Off Road, you get Bilstein suspension, or you can get Fox or Old Man Emu suspension on either the TRD Pro or the Trailhunter. And although that's very good for off-roading, the downside to that is that the 4Runner is a stiffer riding SUV than the Land Cruiser. At least if you go for one of the trims with the off-road suspension or the larger 20-inch wheels. Perhaps it would have been a different story had I had a different trim with the regular suspension and the smaller 17 or 18-inch wheels with the thicker tires. But as it is, the Land Cruiser is definitely the more comfortable driving SUV between the two. But either way, if you're looking for the ultimate off-roader that can pretty much handle anything that you throw at it, either one of these is an excellent SUV. And either one will also be significantly more comfortable to drive than some other type of off-roader like a Jeep Wrangler or Ford Bronco. Another huge advantage that you get with both of these is the interior space and the overall practicality. These are both very large, spacious SUVs, perfect for family duty. Both of them have a very large cargo area, although it is worth noting that if you go for the hybrid version or the Land Cruiser, you do have the battery pack in the floor, which takes up a bit of space when compared to the standard engine 4Runner, which has a lower floor. Another nice benefit of the 4Runner with the standard engine is that you have the option of a third row of seats with a pair of chairs, which are really pretty tight and only suitable for small children, but it's still a nice feature to have for when you need it. The hybrid version of the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser, by comparison, comes standard as 5-seaters, thanks to that hybrid battery in the floor. One important difference worth noting here, though, is that the 4Runner does come standard with a power rear window, a very desirable feature which you do not get on the Land Cruiser. Both SUVs, though, do come with a proper spare tire, which is mounted underneath the vehicle, and both have an excellent amount of interior space. You have very spacious front seats and back seats, perfect for adults to sit comfortably, especially in the Land Cruiser, thanks to its higher roof, which gives you a little bit more headroom. Aside from the extra height, though, both of these SUVs are more or less the same size, having the same wheelbase and overall dimensions. They also have a lot in common when it comes to the interior setups and the interior controls. The base models in both come with a rather small 8-inch touchscreen, but if you go for the higher trims, you do get a much better 14-inch touchscreen, which has a very good user interface that's relatively straightforward to use and does have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And what I really like with both SUVs is that you get plenty of physical controls, real controls for all of your HVAC settings, your off-road controls, and you get a nice proper mechanical gear selector. And I have to say, even though the interiors of both SUVs definitely have a few cheaper touches here and there and plenty of hard plastics, for the most part, the general fit and finish in both is very good. Everything looks and feels incredibly solid, and you do get the sense of very high build quality, which is exactly what you would expect for vehicles that are made in Japan. But then again, I would hope the interiors are high quality given how expensive these SUVs are. The pricing for the 4Runner ranges between $43,000 to $59,000 US, or $56,000 to $71,000 Canadian with the standard engine, and between $60,000 to $70,000 US, or $72,000 to $86,000 Canadian with the hybrid engine. And the pricing for the Land Cruiser is very similar to the 4Runner hybrid, priced between $58,000 to $70,000 US, or $72,000 to $86,000 Canadian. So, no question, both of these are very expensive SUVs, and they do overlap somewhat in price, but in a way, they do still offer pretty decent value for the money. What you have to keep in mind is that these are very desirable vehicles. The demand for them is incredibly high, and they have incredible resale value on the used market as they age down the road, especially in the case of the Land Cruiser. So they do have good value. Now, the big question is, which of the two do you go for? Do you buy the 4Runner, or do you spend a bit more and get the Land Cruiser? Well, from a strictly financial sense, there's no question that the 4Runner is a much better buy. It's basically the same vehicle in most ways for a lower price. And as mentioned, you're really not sacrificing much having to go with that standard non-hybrid engine. So in that way, it is a pretty good deal in the lineup. I think the version of the 4Runner to go with, in fact, would be the TRD Off Road trim with the standard engine, which offers the best blend between off-road capability, features, and price. The issue with the higher trims of the 4Runner with the hybrid engine is that they're basically the same price as the Land Cruiser, in which case it does make more sense to go with the Land Cruiser. Which, yes, is basically just the exact same vehicle with different styling, but you have that Land Cruiser appeal and the much better Land Cruiser resale value in the long run, which is a benefit. My only problem with the Land Cruiser is that if you're willing to spend this much money for one, then you may as well just spend a little bit more and go for the Lexus GX, which is basically just a much nicer version of the Land Cruiser with nicer styling, a more luxurious interior, and a much nicer V6 engine, which significantly elevates the whole driving experience. which kind of puts the Land Cruiser in a somewhat awkward position somewhere in between. The issue is that Toyota really did not do enough to differentiate the Land Cruiser from the 4Runner. They're basically both the same vehicles in most ways. I think it would have been really nice if Toyota had done a little bit more to differentiate the two. For example, by making the Land Cruiser more of a proper old school SUV with a simple, naturally aspirated V6 engine, no hybrid system, just basic features, just keep it a nice, basic, old school mechanical SUV. That would have really given it a lot of appeal, especially given its reputation for being such a rugged, reliable, well-made SUV. Ultimately though, you're really not going to go wrong choosing any one of these SUVs, and it is really nice to see that Toyota does offer so much choice if an off-road SUV is your thing. So there you have it. Now, after watching this comparison, which SUV would be your choice? The Toyota 4Runner or the Toyota Land Cruiser? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at my other videos by clicking the links up in the corner. And if you live in Ontario and are planning to buy a vehicle, know that OMVIC is the vehicle sales regulator that's responsible for administering and enforcing the rules that dealerships must follow. To learn more about your consumer protection rights, visit omvic.ca. And if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to visit carhelpcanada.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.